my job today, I guess, if you will, this morning is to kick things off for you. Thank you for the good morning back. I've been up since 4:30, so I'm ready to go. I get to spend just a few minutes with you to talk to you a little bit about courage. And to be perfectly honest, the notion of courage, and when Matthew and Terry reached out to me, was really interested and thankful to be a part of this. Just to give you a bit more of a background of me, I am a survivor of violent crime, and we'll talk a little bit about that and what influence that's had on my life. Professionally, on a day-to-day basis, I recently took a promotion with the Red Deer Emergency Services as the Deputy Chief of Operations. And I have the distinct honor and pleasure, very humbled to be able to lead 160 firefighter advanced care paramedics, of which I think some probably paramedics probably trained in this very location. Some amazing individuals. Further to my background, I started kind of in the world of fire service about 25 years ago, and through that journey, I spent a little bit of time as a training officer, so in the learning and development world, training and delivery. Let's just say, based on your experience, I know just enough to be dangerous. Let's just put it that way. So, very humbled to be in front of you this morning. I think, honestly, I just want to say thank you as we get going. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for pouring your lives into what you're pouring your lives into. The world is changing at an ever, I don't even know how to say it, an ever unending pace of speed, if you will. Technology, culture. I know in the world of emergency services, our culture is being challenged all the time, and it should be. The world is not the same as it was 25 years ago when I started. Further to my background with emergency services, I'm a member of Canada Task Force 2 as an incident management team member. And you'll hear a little bit about that, but I've had the honor and privilege to be in various command roles and emergency operations center roles in 3 of the largest natural disasters in Canadian history: the Calgary floods, Slave Lake wildfires, and most recently Fort McMurray wildfires. So what's thriving through adversity about? It's taking my life as a survivor of violent crime kind of over the past 30 years, and you'll hear a little bit about that story as we get going. And then overlaying that as a first responder, and then overlaying that kind of the working in the world of becoming, I guess, if you will, into senior management and those pieces. And I've gotten the opportunity to tell this story across the world, and my story is one of courage. My story is one of not necessarily knowing the right step at times, but trying to do the right thing. And I know in the world that you work in every day, just like the world that I work in every day, sometimes that doesn't seem totally clear. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about what I lean on a day-to-day basis, what I would like to call kind of the recipe for resilience and the recipe for thriving through adversity. But to start it out, I have to ask a few friends to help me start it out. And I guess what I want to say is that it takes courage to stand up in the face of adversity and do the right thing. And I'm inspired on a day-to-day basis by a lot of folks that I've connected with over the years who have some amazing stories. So I've put that into a little bit of a video to start things off with this morning, and I want to start there.
Resiliency, the ability to carry on in the midst of terrible adversity.
Resilience to me is finding the courage and finding the strength and building yourself back up for yourself. It is overcoming the thing that you think is the most impossible, that is the hardest, that is the most devastating, and taking that and saying, okay, if I'm strong enough to overcome that, then I can overcome anything.
I believe resilience is daring not to give up and making everyone wonder how you're still smiling in spite of it all. Being confident that you can overcome anything that life can throw at you and come out stronger.
Resilience is not quitting, sticking with it, and it takes determination and a positive outlook to be able to pull that off. And for my situation, I have Huntington's disease, and it's a pretty shitty situation, to be honest with you. But instead of rolling over and letting it just run over me, I'm trying to make something positive happen while I have some time here.
I believe resilience is never giving up. If something doesn't work, try something else. Keep pushing forward.
I believe resilience is best described in the words of Rocky Balboa when he says, "You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life." But it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward.
Resilience is the ability to bounce back, recover, and thrive in life.
Mental health, it's okay to not be okay. That's what we tell people. That's what I believe. And resiliency is about building the tools to help you when you're broken.
I believe resilience is the ability to overcome. Doesn't matter what your story is, doesn't matter what your journey is, we all had to overcome things in our lives. I do that by surrounding myself with the best people. They keep me on a path to being the best version of me that I can be regardless of what I go through.
For me, resilience means believing that at the core of people is kindness. And looking at people's behaviors, looking at people's actions, and forgiving them. And for keeping that faith that no one is past hope. And that at the core of us, we are kind and loving.
Resilience. Fall down 7, get up 8.
I believe resilience is not only the ability to bounce back after a crisis, whether as an individual, a community, or an organization, but also the ability to bounce forward, meaning building back better.
I believe resilience is getting up no matter how many times people or life knocks you down, believing in yourself and carrying on and moving on, no matter what.
I believe that resiliency is getting back up, no matter how many times life knocks you down. It's persevering and finding your way through the storm, even if you don't know where you're going. It's taking everything that's meant to break you and using it as a driving force to make yourself a better person. It's choosing to see the beauty and strength in the ugly and painful.
So that last quote is a girl that I've known since she was a little girl. She's a burn survivor. And you'll hear a little about my story. I'm a burn survivor as well. But choosing to see the beauty in the storm. Those are friends of mine. Those are all friends of mine to one degree or another. Some of you may recognize some of the faces. There's an ex-NHL goalie in there who had his throat cut by accident, so playing for the Buffalo Sabres. Struggled with OCD all his life, struggled with anxiety and depression, tried to kill himself not many years ago. Speaks to audiences of all kinds and sizes, if you will, about taking life on in a positive mental state. A good friend of mine who has Huntington's disease, you saw there, been a firefighter for a number of years now, and literally has a death sentence. Has seen his mom pass away before him with the same condition, and is choosing to do whatever he can to be positive in the midst of that. Literally can watch and count the days of where he'll be sitting in a chair and won't be able to move. Other ladies in that video, survivors of violent crime, had their child, some of their children murdered. Some of the other folks in there just dealing with everyday life. One of the gents in there was in a very famous band, and the very famous band went away. He made millions of dollars. The band decided to go away, and he didn't have a lot in the bank, and then his family was gone. And then life can change in the blink of an eye, and the work that you do every day and the world that you're in every day is tough. Adversity is no respecter of persons, and I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say with respect to that. So a little bit about me. My story started about, I guess if you will, 28 years ago in a small farming community just outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba. You may have remembered in the news in the last couple of years, I guess if you will, where immigrants were trying to cross the border at southern Manitoba in the town of Emerson. Our town was just about 10, 15 kilometers away from there. Literally sits 7 kilometers from the U.S.-Canadian border in the Bible Belt of southern Manitoba. My mom, single parent, grew up with just my mom and I in a little small apartment in Winnipeg. She worked kind of her tail off, I guess, if you will. Worked for a trucking company as a file clerk, wanted to be in HR. Went to school every night to get her schooling done. Got her dream job to be the head of human resources for a multinational national printing company in this small little town in southern Manitoba. Decides to move us out there one day, 1990, September of 1990, we move out to this little town. 2,900 people. 2,900 people at the time, and about 30 to 35 churches, I guess, if you will. And they only provide that stat, I guess, if you will, for the context, in the context of the type of community it was. A very trusting community. Nobody locked their doors at night. I literally took my bicycle to high school, left it, in the bike stand, never locked up. I'd take my bike to the mall. We had a mall in this little town, you can imagine. Take my bike there, and you could leave it. Generally would be there when you got out. If it wasn't, it was just because someone needed to borrow it, and they were going to bring it back pretty soon. That's how trusting this community was. So I moved there at 14 years old in September of 1990 for a better life. My mom moved me there for a better life. She had achieved her dream and was going to give that to her son. Quite quickly, I got to know a gent by the name of Curtis Clausen, nicknamed Pelke. I was a goalie. My dream in life was to play in the NHL as a goalie. Clearly, that's working out for me. I don't know. If the Oilers need a goalie, if anybody's connected, you can hook me up. But I made a connection with Curtis very quickly, and it's just one of those things where when you move to a new town, just like I've just done with my children, it's a blessing when you can connect with somebody. Curtis just took me in, and the best way I could describe Curtis in 10 or 20 seconds or less is just simply if you close your eyes and thought about that person in your life. We all have that person in our life that just makes you feel better about yourself, that you just want to be around, makes you laugh, and just happy and go lucky. And that was Curtis. Not a mean bone in his body. No one would ever want to have harm come to him. The second gent in this story is a gent by the name of Earl Giesbrecht. Earl Giesbrecht was 17 years old. He was I guess if you will, a high school senior. He was in grade 12. Our high school was 400 kids, so you didn't know everybody, but you knew everybody. I guess if that made sense in a town of 2,900, 3,000 people. Earl was a guy that I was warned about for whatever reason. We walked into town, and the police chief took it upon himself to introduce himself to my mother, telling my mother to make sure that I stayed away from Curtis. Make sure I stayed away from Earl. I'm just a trusting individual. Take a disc profile, do any of those profiling things that we do as leaders, and the disc profile says to you, if you read it about me, Tyler thinks everyone's a friend. He just trusts everybody. And not that I befriended Earl, but we were on the same hockey teams, and we just kind of got to know each other. Fast forward a couple months into November, my mom met a gent, and that was part of the reason we moved out there. And this gent and my mom decided they were going to go away for the weekend. Curtis grew up on a little farm just outside of town, had 2 younger brothers, and his parents were a bit older. So when my mom presented me with the option of, hey, do you want to stay home alone in this very safe community, or do you want to stay with Kurt and his parents on the farm and his little brothers? I don't think I have to tell you which we picked. So that night, it was a Friday, we got off school, and the plan was we were going to go to a teen dance. Go back to the very heavily religious community that we were in. The teen dance actually made the New York Times that night after this whole incident. We showed up at the teen dance, the whole hockey team was there. We saw Earl there that night. We spent a bit of time there. It was nothing different to me. I went to dances all the time, if you will, in the city of Winnipeg, but not so much in Altona. We hung out there a little bit, and then the plan was to go back to my place. We had a hockey tournament the next morning, and his parents were going to pick us up, take us to the game. We had a couple people over at the time, and they left probably about 11:30 in the evening. The plan for us was we were going to put a movie in. We just rented the brand new release, The Hunt for Red October, on VHS. I'd do a Sean Connery impression for you, but it wouldn't go well for me. So we put the movie in, and about midnight, a knock at the door. We go to the back door. It's a very little house. If you see the picture behind me, about 900 square feet. We go to the back porch, and I open the door, and there's Earl there standing, dressed all in black, and he has a duffel bag. It was not a typical November day in southern Manitoba. No snow on the ground. It was probably only minus 10. We stood at the door for about 10 minutes while we were kind of figuring out what to do. It's kind of one of those awkward things where your relative shows up and you don't really want them there. Doesn't really happen much anymore in life, I guess. People text now, right? But we stood at the door for about 10 minutes. Finally, we decided to let him in. Curtis was always very aware of Earl, and I had never heard kind of some of the stories, but Curtis grew up kind of in the community and knew what Earl was about. We let him in. We started watching that movie, and kind of, curiosity gets the better of a 14-year-old at the time, and Curtis was 15, but for me specifically. Okay, I'll bite. I said, what's in the bag? Why are you dressed in black? Oh, I was out doing break and enters. Okay. You remember, I came from the big city, so is this guy just trying to be cool? What does that look like? I said, okay, I'll bite some more. What's in the bag? Well, it's the tricks of the trade. Okay, well, what's the tricks of the trade? Oh, he opens it up, and the typical things you'd see, gloves, little pry bars, things to break into people's houses, he says. I said, okay. Kind of mildly unimpressed. At the end of that, he pulls out a .357 Magnum, a handgun. Bullets in it, fully loaded. Hey, you want to see this? Sure. I'd never watched Dirty Harry, but friends of mine had talked about it at 14. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'll see that. Pulls the bullets out, gives it to me. Curtis wanted nothing to do with it. Puts the bullets back in. I give it back to him. I should have clued in that this wasn't a normal evening thus far. Puts the gun back in the bag, and we go about watching the movie. It's about 1:30 in the morning right now. The movie ends, and somehow Earl corrals Curtis and I into my bedroom. The screen behind you, the room, I guess off to the left of your view, is my bedroom. Obviously, the big bay window that you see, or the window was our living room. Quite the small bedroom. Curtis and I are in there, and somehow Earl sneaks away for a second, comes back, and he's pointing the gun at us when he comes back. And he quite calmly tells me to tie Curtis with his hands up behind his back. I ask Earl, why are you doing this? He says, you know why. I had no idea. I tied up Curtis with his hands behind his back, and then he put masking tape over Curtis's eyes. And then he did the same to me, and he separated us. So just in the pattern of the house, or the floor, layout of the house, if you will, my mom's room was directly behind my bedroom, so he was kind of in the next room behind me. And that was the last time I ever saw Curtis. We woke up to this headline on Monday morning. Like I mentioned, it was about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. Earl would come back. He'd be gone for a bit. He'd come back into my room. And over the next couple hours, a bunch of different things happened. He made it look like I thought he was just trying to scare us. He came into my room. He was like he was unhooking my Nintendo. I guess we don't have Nintendos anymore. My entertainment system. He was unhooking my TV. I thought he was just trying to scare us. He was going to steal things. Now things are starting to come together in my head about the warnings that people had said. He'd be gone, and I'd hear things kind of from the other room. I wouldn't know what's going on. And came back in my room on one visit, and I was molested by Earl. While all this was going on, there'd be times where I'd be saying to him, why are you doing this? And I didn't get an answer. There'd also be times where I'd be trying to ask him what time it was. I was trying to keep track of the time so I could put a time to when these things were happening. All the while assuming that I was going to be getting out of there. About 4:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, Earl comes into my room. I'd heard a bunch of banging in the other room. He'd been gone for quite some time. He came back into my room. He says, okay, I'm going to let you guys go. I said, okay. Doing whatever and saying whatever I need to say to help get through the situation. He took the masking tape off my eyes, probably to his detriment. He said, okay, in the doorway between, you kind of just see it in that picture, the doorway between my bedroom and the living room, he says, just kneel down and turn around. I'm going to cut the tape off your hand. So I could see. And then kind of in one motion, he told me that Curtis was dead. That he killed Curtis. And then he, instead of cutting the tape off my hands, he slit my throat. I kind of just went limp in the doorway. Obviously, I'm very well aware that this isn't good. I don't know how bad I'm cut, but I can just see blood. I get up and I can't go anywhere. I go into my room, I close the door, and he came back in the room and pushed me down on the ground. The house that we lived in there had a wood-burning fireplace. I could grab the little ash shovel and came back in my room, pushed me on the ground, shoved it to the side of my neck, and all I could think of was just play dead, just play dead. All the while thinking that I'm, in fact, dying. I lay there, and over kind of the next 30 seconds, a minute, he turned the light off in my room and grabbed a blanket off my bed and put it on top of me. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, he thinks I'm dying, and he'll go away. And then I remember hearing the match. Doused the blanket in something and lit the match. Very much awake, as I am now. He's thinking that I've gone unconscious, obviously. And in a short span of time frame, I won't say that I had an audible prayer, and I won't say that I was even kind of a faith-based person at the time, but I just remember thinking to myself, okay, this is it. There's not much that goes through your brain at 14 years old. Life is kind of flashing before your eyes, if you will. All I remember thinking is I'm never going to see my mom again. And then I remember just thinking to myself, or a prompting of, just get up. Get up. You're still kicking. You're still alive. Get up. And that really took probably about 10 seconds to have that all happen in my head. And as I got up, he'd closed the door already. I got out of my bedroom, and he was in the living room, just outside of my bedroom door. If you could picture it, there's a couch, a very small house. It probably fit in a little area here. I come out of the bedroom, and he's on the other side of the couch lighting a fire on the floor. And he sees me. He's pretty upset, obviously. He grabs me, punches me a couple times, and by now there's a fire burning behind him. It's getting quite big, and there's a fire burning behind me in the bedroom. And smoke's billowing down to our head height. And then all of a sudden, he just took off. He went out the back door. I think he assumed I would be following him. We never used our front door, the door that you see there. We had a bunch of boxes in front of it. Never used it. I didn't much care what I had to do. I wasn't going the same direction he went. So I got the boxes out of the way, my hands still behind my back, and got myself out the door and ran to my neighbor's place. A neighbor I'd never met before. We just moved in 3 months earlier. I remember ringing the doorbell. So again, 4:30 in the morning. And the porch light came on. I thought, wow, holy crap, I'm out. And he opened the door, and his eyes were about this big hole in my neck, and I'm all burnt. He kind of yells, and we turn around, and there's someone having a cigarette behind us in the dark. He grabs me, he brings me inside. We're in a little farming community, right? We're volunteer fire and ambulance. So we walk in the door, and I'm pretty hurt. There was no 911 at the time, so he dials a 7-digit phone number, if you will. Calls the fire department and ambulance. In the meantime, I just motioned for something to write down. I couldn't talk. Right? Started writing everything down. Earl Giesbrecht did this to me. My friend Curtis Clausen's inside. My parents are here. Call these people. We're an hour away from Winnipeg. There's no stars, nothing like that. Thinking I'm not making it. About the same time, they put a tea towel around my neck, and by now the fire's billowing outside of the house. And it was the quickest response I've ever seen. The ambulance is backing in the driveway. Literally before the attendant or the medic could even get out of the back, the doors opened, and I jumped in and sat down and looked at him and hit the side of the ambulance. And they closed the doors and took me to the hospital. The doctor had one look at me when I came in and just put me back in the ambulance. And the last thing I remember is kind of saying to the doctor who was riding with me, kind of just motion, I'm going to have a nap now. They got me into the first trauma center and stitched up my throat. Took 200 stitches inside and out. Stitched my throat up. My carotid was missed by a dime whip. Suffered third-degree burns to 25% of my body, and that was kind of the journey, I guess, if you will, that started in the hospital. Woke up on Monday morning, and this was the headline. My mom was beside my bed and told me that Curtis had passed away. Earl was arrested without incident on his family farm, of which I've heard later he was hoping that the cops would kill him. They didn't. So Earl's in custody. Now I'm recovering. What does that journey look like? I mentioned I'd suffered third-degree burns to 25% of my body. I was put on a ventilator and for an extended period of time, which would end up causing me quite the grief for the next couple of years. So I started my journey in the hospital in November. Things went very well. I was actually very fortunate in the sense that all my burns healed very well. They took skin from my legs, stapled it to my chest, if you will, and went down that long road of recovery. I pulled the ventilator out, not knowing if I'd ever talk again. Much to the chagrin of my family and those close to me, I haven't shut up since then. But I woke up one night as I thought the journey was all good. Look what I'd just gone through. I remember thinking for the first 2 weeks I didn't dream. My body was just in shock. My brain was in shock. I was just happy to be alive. And I remember my grandma standing beside my bed and said to me, Tyler, you're still here for a reason. And what was really powerful was what she didn't say. She didn't say, this happened for a reason. And at 14, in the midst of all this, I didn't really understand what she meant by that. And it was something for me to figure out as this journey went along. But just before Christmas, I woke up thinking, hey, everything's great. But I woke up one night in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe. Ring the bell. The nurses come in. We get everybody relaxed. They send me for an emergency CAT scan, which shows that my windpipe had been narrowing. So because I was on a ventilator for too long, I developed what's called a stenosis, and the cartilage in my windpipe was collapsing. Plus the scar tissue around that. So literally my windpipe was closing in on me. So if you look at the picture just by Christmas, that's just before they took me in for that. You can see they've already started debriding, getting some of the burn bandages off, of which took probably anywhere from 2.5 to 3 to 4 weeks to actually get through all that. But that was just before I went in for that surgery, where they put a trach tube in my throat, which I would have for the next 2 years, a hole in my throat. Some days I could talk, some days I couldn't. Some doctors told me, one of my ear, nose, and throat doctors said, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. One other doc said, no, you're going to go through this, it's going to be all good. There's a reason they still call it medical practice. No doctors in the room? Lots of friends who are doctors, and my doctors were amazing. Very special pictures to me. The other picture that was very special when you talk about courage and doing what's right and continuing on and building relationships, if you will, was the top picture where 2 reasons it's special. One, I think, is because that's the last time the Bombers won the Grey Cup, which was actually 1990. But if you look at the gent who's kneeling, number 3, Trevor Kenner, was the place kicker. A friend of mine picked up the phone. This was all over the news. They just won the cup. Picked the phone and said, hey, you know that kid on TV? He's a friend of mine. Would you bring the cup to see him, just to cheer him up a little bit? They brought the cup literally a couple days after. They won, and then came to see all the kids. But Trevor and I have remained friends and been family friends to this day, to the point where I've watched his kids grow up. One of his kids is talking about being a firefighter. All I knew is that I was alive, and I didn't know what that meant. So in December, I had that hole put in my throat after I thought everything was going to be okay. And my goal was to be on skates by the end of January. So that would be November, December, January, 3 months in the hospital, and be back in school. I met that goal, and little did I realize how important meeting goals would be in the face of adversity. There was literally some days where I was just being able to get up and do 1 or 2 things. I can't tell you how painful it is to be a burn survivor and have to go through the aftermath of it. The burn takes literally seconds to happen. The recovery is unimaginable when it comes to intensity and pain. So my goal was to be on the ice by the end of January. I was on the ice by the end of January with the support of people. It wasn't just me. My coaches put me on the ice for a warm-up. I tried to make one save and rip my burns open on one of my arms. But I didn't care. I was still happy to be there and happy to be with people. And so now what? January of 1991, by March, the wheels of justice had moved way quicker back then. By March, I was in a preliminary hearing. And that preliminary hearing, these are images from the trial, but that preliminary hearing was 2 things. One was to see if there's enough evidence to go to trial, and then also to put Earl to adult court. He was 17 at the time that this all took place. I spent 3 days, 2.5 days on the stand. It took so long because I had to write everything out. I couldn't talk at the time. So they'd ask me a question, I had to write it out, give it to someone to read. Earl, the judge deemed that there was enough evidence to go to trial, and then Earl was bumped to adult court. By November of that next year, so literally a year later, Earl's on trial for first-degree murder, attempted murder, and a whole bunch of other things. I think they allotted 5 days at the time. I was on the stand for about a full day, of which the defense tried to suggest that Earl wasn't about himself. So he pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, and the whole defense was based around that there had been things that had been done, or there was a trigger to make this happen. The judge charged the jury. The jury came back, an all-female jury. Judge charged the jury. The jury came back 3.5 to 4 hours later, and was convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Sentencing at the time, 25 years to life, no chance of parole for 25 years on 2 counts. So if you do the math, we're at 2018. That was in 1990. So we'll get there, where we're at with that. So that's the bad part of life. We all have stories. To be perfectly honest, I tell this story all over North America. The most important part of that, though, is not what happened. I have to tell you that, kind of just set the stage, I guess, if you will. Back to my friends that have helped me talk about that innate human desire to survive and that we can get through even in the face of Huntington's disease or cancer or something like that. shows us that we all have the ability to find that courage when we need to and step up and do the right thing and do things even when we don't know how and what that's going to look like. I can't tell you how scary it is to be on a stand at 14 years old when everybody's telling you, well, he's just so smart, he's going to get off and he's going to be back in the community. Now what? 1990, I'm the kid that's left in this community. Curtis grew up in this community and, over his 15 years, and I'm the one who's kind of left there now. The community is grieving. They were very supportive to me, but even through their grief, over time, then what? Feelings, others, all those kinds of things come out. I was never treated poorly, but you could see that it was definitely something to figure out on both sides of things. Fast forward a few years, I didn't really care about school. Finally, around grade 12, my guidance counselor sits down with me and says, "What do you want to do with your life, Tyler?" I said, "I want to be an architect." She opens my grades and she goes, "How about we talk about something else?" Closed it. I said, "Okay, I want to be a firefighter." Kind of looked at me. He said, "You know you've been in a burn ward, right?" I said, "Yep." But I said, I was very inspired by the people who came to help me that day. And I want to do something different, and I want to help people just like they did to me. Quite the contrast of architecture to firefighting. But I started on the path of that. And I still remember the first call I ever went on. And I figured out a goal in my mind. I wanted to be a professional firefighter, and I figured out how to get there. I walked into the volunteer fire chief's office. Bob Stacey, his name was. I said, "Chief, I want to join the fire department, volunteer fire department and ambulance. I want to create a path, I guess, if you will, to professional firefighting. I want to join here. I want to get into fire college in Brandon, Manitoba. And I want to find a full-time firefighting job. I want to go and do something, rah, rah, all that kind of stuff." He says, "Yeah, I know what you do." He goes, "Your mom was here to talk to me already." "Great, thanks, Mom." Yeah. He said, "Let me see what we can do." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Fill out this application." It was a one-pager. I'm 17 years old. I can't legally even join yet. I give him the application. He takes it to the membership meeting. At the time, it was a vote. So, there's 30 members. Did this guy get to join or not? This gal get to join or not? One of the firefighters, a couple of firefighters put up their hand. Says to the chief, "So Tyler's told you he wants to join us. He wants to go to college. He wants to leave." He goes, "So we're going to invest time in him. We're going to get to know him. We're going to train him, and then he's going to go away." One of the most powerful stories I ever saw of leadership and courage in the face of kind of questioning was the chief said, "You're right. We know he's going to leave. But think about our involvement in community and think about how we can be a part of this person's story. How healing it would be for us to be a part of that and see something good come from all of this." So at 17 and a half, I was joined as a training member. Went on my first call. They brought me to, and I still remember it today, because it kind of shaped my career, if you will. Brought me to a mile road in the middle of southern Manitoba. If anybody's from Manitoba or Saskatchewan, you can literally watch your dog run away for 3 days. That's exactly where we were standing in the middle of. But this particular call, my first call ever, was a triple fatality where two vehicles had met at an intersection. And these three little old ladies said, "We're going to a fall supper." And I can still remember seeing their car in the ditch. They brought me and said, "Tyler, stand over here and do traffic." We're in the middle of a mile road in the middle of nowhere in the country. Do traffic. But I can still see the picture because of the impact and just that defining moment in my life. 3 years earlier, these folks had taken me to the hospital. They found Curtis dead in my mom's room and had to deal with those images. And it was kind of that defining moment of my head of, do I really want to do this? And I decided, yes, I do. And so the opportunity's been there to come and tell my story, but it's not just about that. It's about what I've done with it and been able to do with it through the support of other people and failing, to be perfectly honest at times, and figuring out what courage means at times. Figuring out what mental toughness means. And so when I stand in front of people, people would say to me, "How do you get through that? What does that look like? How do you get through a trial? And then what does that look like? And how do you go on to be a firefighter?" And there's days where I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of too young to kind of figure it all out." But as I became a responder and 25 years in, I've realized that there's a bit of a recipe for that. I fully believe that we're all able to continue to build our resilience. And in the face of what we're doing every day professionally and the changes that are coming at us, I know specifically in my world, cultural changes that are needed in emergency services. Pretty powerful thing. So what I've come up with, if you will, is a recipe for resilience. And to be honest, I've tested this whether I'm in Fort McMurray or just sitting in the office or dealing with moving a house and 2 sick kids and speaking, just the general, I guess, if you will, flavor of life. So that's what I want to go with you today, the recipe for resilience, if you will. And we're going to move pretty fast because we only got so much time with you this morning. The recipe for resilience, what I kind of believe, and we'll go through them all, kind of these 4 areas. And like a recipe, I can't tell you what it is and what it isn't and how much of it and when to use it. It's going to come back to where you're at in the season in life that you're in, if you will. But social supports and mental toughness, defining your purpose, control and perspective, and helping others. I apply these every day, whether I'm at work or at home. And to be perfectly honest, Tuesday night I'm speaking in Banff, and I'm driving out there, and just the stress of, again, to be first world problem, but go back to perspective. I remember looking at the mountains going, I'm not coming to speak to them tonight. They asked me if I wanted the lights up or lights down. I said, turn the lights off because I just need to talk to myself. Perfectly honest, I need to do a bit of a self-check. But these 4 areas I go back to, and these 4 areas have come to be true to me, whether it's professionally or personally, through all those things, I guess, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about the first one. Excuse me, social supports, mental toughness. By mental toughness, I don't mean being tough all the time. I simply mean, how are we developing our emotional intelligence? How are we developing our ability to take on the next wave that's coming to us? And some days that means you cry. Some days that means you go and you find someone to talk to. Some days you go for just a mental health check. Hey, kind of struggling with these kinds of things. What does that look like? I can't tell you how powerful it was for me from the age of 14 years old to be able to talk about the incident that happened to me. I work with a lot of PTSD folks, PTSD researchers, especially in the world that we live in. Red Deer Emergency Services, the city of Red Deer is facing a huge opioid crisis just like other provinces, but I can tell you we're the 2nd busiest ambulance in the province, and I can tell you that we're the highest opioid death rate per capita of 100,000. Our first responders are stretched every day. And I'm awake at night some days because of how do we help them just continue to do the job they're doing and go home and still just have an amazing life, if you will. How do we help our employees? The social supports, again, I can't emphasize enough. Canadian Mental Health Association talks about how we're becoming a victim of the self-cult, I guess you will, or the self-of cult. It's all about us. But we're innately human. We need to connect, and we need to realize that that's so important for us. The mental toughness piece and these social supports have come back to help me in many ways, even as a young leader. I was assistant deputy chief in Calgary for 9 years before I moved to Red Deer, and I kind of worked all over it in the fire service. And about 2 years in, a battalion chief came to me and said, "Hey, Ty, do you know you have a reputation?" I said, "What do you mean?" And in my whole life, all I've wanted to do is help people, and getting into leadership was just a vehicle to do that, or a mechanism to further do that. He says, "Hey, Ty, you have a reputation of being a hard ass. People feel like you have no empathy." And it was a time in life, again, where I was coming to a defining point as a young leader, realizing all the things I thought I was doing right, I wasn't caring about people. That social support was huge for me. I had to go back and find people I trusted. I had to get a coach. I had to figure my way through this. It was one of the most hardest but best lessons I ever learned as a young leader. Sometimes we just need a reset, and sometimes we have to accept that we fail and then figure our way through it. Social supports and mental toughness. Defining your purpose. Excuse me. We have to believe that there is something greater than just us from a purpose perspective. We don't believe that we are here for more than just getting up every day and going to work and those pieces. When life throws stuff at you, to be perfectly honest, it's going to keep weighing you down, and your cup is never going to, you're never going to be able to dump your cup out. The next wave comes, the next wave comes, the next wave comes. No one handed me a bag of money or $1 million just because someone tried to kill me. And to be perfectly honest, I had a bad incident happen 30 years ago, but my life has been pretty blessed since then. I had my family around me, I had people come around me, and I was able to kind of chase my dreams and my goals. But I tell you, this is the number one foundation for me. I believe that I have a purpose. And for some folks, that's a faith-based purpose. For others, it's not necessarily. But believing that you have a foundation that's driven in means that when the storms come, you're good. You can bend and not break, and you continue to become stronger and stronger. Sitting in the hospital bed one night just before Christmas, just before I found out about my throat issue, I could get up and walk now. I'd been lying in bed for literally five weeks, and I could get up and walk after my burns had healed enough. I ring the bell. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. The nurse had to come all the way down the hallway. Long walk. Comes in, and I started to get to know our nurses very well. Betty says to me, "Hey, Ty, how's it going?" I said, "Good." She goes, "What's up? Are you okay? Like something wrong?" No. I said, "Actually, I'm just thirsty." The nightstand was just outside of my reach. I'm just wondering if you can get me some more water. Being very gracious, she went and filled the water up and brought it to me. Is that good? That was good. You having a good sleep? Yeah, I'm okay. Everything's all good though? Nothing wrong? No. And I'll just preface this with, we got to know each other very well. There was another defining point in my life where she looked at me and said, "Ty," she fluffed my pillow up. She goes, "Ty, if you ever ring that buzzer again, because something's not wrong," she goes, "I'll break your leg." I didn't really know what to make of that at 14, but I got to know Betty very well. The point of it was I needed that tough love at the time. She said, "Tyler, you're not a victim. The victim was Curtis. He died. You've survived, and you need to figure your way through this." She goes, I'm not gonna placate to that. You need to realize that you have to invest in your own survivability and your ability to get to the notion where you're going to thrive in life. It's not enough to just survive. We have to thrive. We have to give back. We have to take what's been bending and breaking at us and share our stories. Those folks that were sharing their story, the courage it takes for them to share their story and the grief that they've been going through, helps inspires other people to do the same. When somebody takes a stand against adversity, takes that courage, if you will, it inspires other people. But they don't know that unless you tell the story. So I can't emphasize enough from a purpose perspective. The other thing that inspires me is a gent by the name of Viktor Frankl. And some of you maybe have heard the name before. But quite quickly, Viktor Frankl was a famous neurologist, psychiatrist. In and around the time of World War II, he was scooped up in the Nazi concentration camps, went to Auschwitz. His wife was separated from him. But in the middle of all that, he still continued to try and understand what made people survive in the midst of all that, in the midst of despair. He continued his work, if you will, in a concentration camp, of noting what was helping people get through to the next day. People helping other people, having a purpose. He went on as he got out. For him, it was focusing on his beloved, his wife. He realized that the Nazi guards could never take away from him his hope, and in the midst of what I can't even imagine, unimaginable circumstances, to be honest. When he kind of, I guess if you will, got out and life had moved on in a different direction, he came up with a bunch of different things, but one theory that he talked about was 3 things. That as humans, we all have an innate ability to control how we feel and what that looks like. He talked about 3 things: the freedom of will, the will to meaning, and the meaning of life. And quite simply, and I'm going to read it quite quickly, freedom here is defined as the space of shaping one's own life within the limits of given possibilities. As spiritual persons, humans are not just reacting organisms, but autonomous and capable of actively shaping our lives. We can act and respond in spite of circumstances. So we have freedom of will. Will to meaning. Human beings are not only free, but most importantly free to something. What are we free to? What's our purpose? What are we living for? What are we applying in the face of adversity? What courage? Where's our courage coming from? We're designed for something greater than ourselves. And finally, he talks about meaning in life. We're called upon on the grounds of our freedom and responsibility to bring forth the best possibleness in themselves and the world, and realizing that in every moment we have an opportunity. I only have a few minutes left with you. I'm kind of in the last pieces. Moving on to control and perspective. When I did my first EMT training way back when, I walked into the class, and literally on one of my first days, the instructor says, "There's 2 rules about being EMT." I said, "What are those?" Rule number 1, people die. Rule number 2, EMTs always can't change rule number 1. And it was pretty powerful for me from a control and perspective, I guess if you will, approach. I can't control everything in life. Things are going to happen without my control. And to be perfectly honest, resilience research tells us that those folks who are most adaptable and flexible are those who figure out how in their mind to adapt readily and quickly to change. Adversity is really about change, if you think about it. Today you're all good. Tomorrow the doctor calls you and says the dreaded C word. You get a knock on the door and someone's passed away that was just alive before. Maybe a job status changes. The economy's going for a shit. Excuse my language. In this room, there's people dealing with multiple different facets on the spectrum of health, finances, relationships. But realizing that being able to be resilient is the fact that we figure out how to adapt to change. That mental toughness perspective. And sometimes it's not always easy, to be honest. So for me, what was so critical was I had some forgiveness challenges, to be perfectly honest. And one day in 2003, kind of on the inspiration of my mom, who did this before me, I went to visit Earl in prison for 2 days. I could literally talk about that visit for an hour and a half or 2 hours or even longer. So I'm just going to give you the condensed version. I went for two reasons. One, to tell him I forgave him. And two, because I wanted to make sure he knew I believed he needed to stay in prison. He kind of gave me a why that day. I'd moved past the whys. He said, Tyler, why this happened? Kind of a bit of a story of convenience, if you will. But, Tyler, that night, here's what happened. You triggered me. I said, oh, what did I do? He said, we were sitting in that group of people with our hockey team, and you called me a homo, and that was just it. I said, tell me more. He said, well, I've been struggling with my sexuality all, in this religious town and those kinds of things. And I said, well, I can understand that. He told me a little bit about his story. I didn't question it. I fully believe that I still stood by what the courts ruled, which was he was guilty of premeditated murder. And I said that to him. And I said, you're right, Earl, I probably did call you that because I was 14 years old, a white kid, played hockey. I called everybody that probably, socially acceptable at the time. But I said, it doesn't change the status of where you're at and why you're there. So we spent 2 days together, and we agreed to disagree on some things, and then we went on. But what I have to tell you about forgiveness and the power of control and perspective is I realized that a lot of times we're more interested in living in offense than we're walking through the process of forgiveness. And I don't mean forgiveness has to be from a faith perspective, but just innately, it takes time, effort, and energy to work through how we feel when we're offended versus just being offended. I can just live in that. That's easy. I'm just going to be pissed at you. It can be out of an assumption. It can be off of misinformation, miscommunication. But I realized how empowering it was to be able to have that to lean on. Hugely for me. Perspective is huge. It's been a huge reminder for me the past couple weeks. A couple minutes left. The last thing, helping others. You might think, well, you do this every day, Tyler. You work in you work in emergency services. That's kind of what you've done. But there's so many of us who need a reminder. So kind of just as we're wrapping up, there's kind of 5 areas when we talk about helping others. And this is all based in research. I'll tell you this, I'm kind of an amateur academic, so that makes me just a bit dangerous. Okay. Helping others involves the power of social connection, that cult of self. We seem to be breeding that. Without connection, we feel misunderstood, run the risk of being severely lonely, low self-confidence. Lack of social connection has long been proven for a cause of depression, and that's from a study of the University of Minnesota a number of years ago. Helping others can create change in thought patterns. So this means you get a much needed break from your negative thoughts and might find yourself experiencing positive ones in helping others. Helping others has been linked to raise in self-esteem. Volunteering can teach you new skills, improve upon the ones you already have, help you feel useful and recognize your inner resources. Related back to that purpose. Viktor Frankl was helping others, and in that found his purpose, and in that found inspiration to continue on in the midst of, again, unimaginable circumstances. Helping others changes your perspective. Volunteering does the work for you. You are shown different perspective on life by interacting with other people. And finally, helping others leads to overall better health. 4-year study carried out at Carnegie Mellon University on adults over 50 who volunteered found that those who volunteered for more than 200 hours per year were less likely to develop high blood pressure and more likely to enjoy psychological well-being. When you give of yourself, it gets you out of yourself. You realize how you can help others and the things you bring to the world. It gives you that purpose in the midst of everything. I mentioned before that no one gave me $1 million just because something bad happened to me. But to be perfectly honest, my story doesn't end. We're 2018, and over the last, let's say 5 to 6 years, Earl's bounced back and forth between escorted absences, unescorted absences, gay parole, back in prison. But there are no free passes in life. I can tell you that if I hadn't had the help that I've had and people caring about me, and then also challenged myself to try and take some steps when I didn't feel like I had the courage to do the right thing, I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. The story would just simply be, hey, look at this bad thing that happened to me. And you'd have some empathy for me for a couple years. But after a while, you'd be like, really? That's not inspiring. Bad things happen to people all the time. I just love hearing people's stories about how they've overcome and the things they've done to overcome. So lastly, resilience is choosing to see the beauty. If you take anything away from today, I hope you take away that I'm inspired by you, by the work that you do. And keep sharing your stories. Share your stories with your students, share your stories with, everybody's going through something. People are like garbage trucks. What do you mean? I had somebody come into my office the other day, going through a bunch of bad stuff at home. I have to care about them as a person. I have to realize that that's just where they decided to dump their garbage that day. They needed a clean out, and then they're good to go again. But I have to care about them as a person before I can ask them to do work with me, to be perfectly honest. I want to thank you so much for having me today. I realize you have a full day, so I hope pretty close on time. I hope we're good, Matthew. Thank you. But yeah, thank you so much, and I hope the day is inspiring for you.